This is a list of what happens when ordinary people have almost nothing and still need to feed themselves and their families through a 10-hour shift. Some of what you're about to hear will genuinely shock you. Some of it will make you unexpectedly hungry. All of it will make you look at your lunch differently. These are 15 British working man sandwiches that no one makes anymore. We start at 15 and count down to the one that defines them all. Number 15, the toast sandwich. A slice of toast between 2 slices of bread. That is the entire sandwich. It sounds like someone ran out of ideas. It wasn't. Mrs. Beeton wrote it into her book of household management in 1861 as a meal for invalids. The working class took one look at it and saw something else, a filling that cost nothing beyond the fuel to make it. By the early 20th century, it had moved from the sickbed to the factory floor. The logic was brutal and brilliant. Toast adds texture, a crisp center against soft bread, a contrast that tricks the mouth into thinking something more substantial is happening than actually is. By midday the toast had gone limp and the crunch was long gone, but it filled you. The salt gave it flavor. And in 2011, the Royal Society of Chemistry calculated its cost at 7.5 pence and called it the cheapest nutritious lunch in Britain. The men who ate it in the 1920s already knew that. Number 14, the sugar sandwich. In 1953, sugar rationing ended in Britain after 13 years. 13 years of measuring out spoonfuls and watching children's faces fall when there was nothing sweet in the house. When it finally ended, working-class Britain did something entirely human. It went a little wild. 2 slices of bread spread with margarine, heaped with white granulated sugar, pressed together until the grains bit into the soft crumb. The crunch of it was the whole point. That crunch was the taste of abundance, after years of having none. Mothers tucked them into school satchels. Fathers carried them to work. Some families drizzled condensed milk across the sugar when a tin was open, and that version approached something genuinely luxurious. The sugar sandwich was not a quirk. It was a celebration made from the cheapest ingredients available. Every grain felt like a small, defiant victory. Number 13, the condensed milk sandwich. Nestlé's condensed milk sat in pantries across industrial Britain throughout the 1940s and 50s. Shelf-stable, cheap, recommended by the Ministry of Food as a dairy substitute when fresh milk ran short. And workers discovered something important. Spread thick across bread, it was filling, sweet, and oddly satisfying in ways that margarine could never manage. The working-class name for it was the Connie sandwich. Fathers carried them to shipyards and railway depots. Children begged to scrape the inside of the tin. Mothers stretched a single tin across 3 or 4 days. the spread growing thinner each morning until it was little more than a ghost of sweetness on bread. As fridges became standard and fresh dairy became universal, the Connie sandwich faded. But for those who knew it, the taste never quite left. Number 12. The crisp sandwich. Not everything on this list is about suffering. Some of it is about joy. The crisp sandwich is about joy. By the 1960s, crisps had become a staple of British snacking, and at some point, someone put them inside a sandwich. Nobody recorded the moment, but something changed the day it happened. 2 slices of soft white bread, buttered, a full bag of crisps laid in carefully, then pressed together with both palms until you heard the crack of them giving way beneath the bread. The flavour debates were fierce and tribal. Ready salted for the purists, cheese and onion for the working majority, salt and vinegar for those who liked their lunch to bite back. What made it radical was this. In a lunchbox tradition built almost entirely on necessity, it was unashamedly fun. A sandwich that existed not because it had to, but because someone decided lunch could still be something worth looking forward to. Number 11. The fish paste sandwich. Small glass jars, a few pennies each. Salmon paste, sardine paste, anchovy paste. Dark pink or beige, shelf-stable, capable of lasting days once opened. In 1952, you'd find them lined up on every corner shop shelf across Britain. Fish paste was made by pulverizing fish, blending it with butter and enough salt to preserve it without refrigeration, and sealing it in those small glass jars. The smell arrived before the sandwich was even unwrapped. Sharp and briny, it marked out the fish paste eater in any crowded canteen. Housewives spread it thin, because thin made it go further. The protein required no cooking, no refrigeration, no preparation beyond the scrape of a knife. Nobody loved the fish paste sandwich. That wasn't the point. It was always there. It did its job without complaint. In the world of the working class snap tin, that was exactly what was required. Number 10. The chip butty. Hot chips. Thick cut, properly fried, fluffy in the centre. 2 thick slices of white bread, generously buttered. The chips pressed between the slices while still hot, so the butter melted immediately, the bread softened, and the grease soaked through from the other side. Wrapped in newspaper, eaten standing up, probably in the rain, probably on a Friday with wages in your pocket. By the 1960s, chip shops across the industrial north were selling chip butties for a few pence. The real argument, still unresolved, was about the butter. Proper butter, not margarine. The heat of the chips doing the work, transforming the bread into something magnificent. The chip butty never apologized for what it was. It wore its grease stains as a mark of identity. Today it survives on certain pub menus, but as daily fuel, as the Friday reward for 5 days of hard labour, it has gone. And what replaced it has never come close. Number 9. The dripping sandwich. Sunday in a working-class household meant a joint. One joint, budgeted for carefully, cooked slowly. And when the meal was done and the plates were cleared, the fat that had rendered out of the meat was poured into a bowl and left overnight in the cold pantry. By morning it had set. The top layer, pale and waxy, was the fat. Beneath it, dark and trembling, was the jelly, the concentrated essence of the roast, salty and deep and rich in a way that nothing synthetic could replicate. Spread onto bread, it tasted like home. In the early 1950s, a £2 loaf cost 11p. Dripping was free. The thriftiest meal in Britain, and by any honest account, one of the most satisfying. As animal fats gave way to vegetable spreads, and the Sunday roast moved from the kitchen to the pub menu, the dripping sandwich went with it. The bowl in the pantry was replaced by something from a supermarket shelf, and nobody thought twice. Number 8. The Spam Sandwich. By 1945, Britain had imported over 100 million tins of spam. Processed pork shoulder, pressed into a rectangular block, sealed in a tin that opened with a small metal key. It arrived from America in enormous quantities to fill the gap left by rationed fresh meat. No refrigeration needed, no cooking required. You turned the key, you sliced the meat, you put it between bread. The diaries from this period say the same thing again and again. Spam again. At least it's something. That phrase captures the entire relationship. Not fond, not resentful. Pragmatic. You were grateful for protein when protein was scarce. Some added mustard. A leaf of lettuce if the garden was producing. Anything to lift a filling that was fundamentally just doing its job. When rationing ended and fresh pork returned to the butcher's counter, the spam sandwich retreated. It was food built for an emergency. When the emergency passed, it went with it. Number 7. The corned beef sandwich. Every housewife in industrial Britain knew the ritual. Take the trapezoid tin. Find the small metal key. Slot the strip through it and wind. The lid peeled back in a slow spiral, and the corned beef, dense and dark and faintly crumbly, sat in its mould, ready to be turned out. By the early 1950s, over 200,000 tons of tinned beef arrived at British docks each year. From that supply, millions of sandwiches were made. Sliced thick on Mondays, thinner as the week progressed, mashed with a fork by Thursday, when the last scraping needed to cover 2 more slices. Often with Branston pickle. Often with nothing, because the budget had already said what it had to say. The oral histories don't describe it with affection or contempt. It was simply the default. When nothing else was available, and the wages were thin, you opened a tin, and lunch was solved. Number 6. The black pudding sandwich. Before first light, before the factory whistle, a smell was drifting through the terraced streets of Lancashire and Yorkshire. Black pudding frying. Made from pig's blood, oatmeal and fat, sliced thick and crisped in a hot pan, then pressed between 2 slices of buttered bread. Pennies a length at the butcher's counter. Rich, savoury, dense enough to quiet the hungriest stomach through a 10-hour shift. Some added brown sauce. The purists insisted it needed nothing beyond itself, and the purists were right. Children were often squeamish. Fathers ate it without ceremony. As squeamishness spread through the culture and supermarkets favoured blander fillings, the black pudding sandwich retreated from the daily lunchbox. In Bury, Lancashire, it still commands serious respect, but as working fuel, as the thing that got a man through a full shift, it has gone quiet. That is a genuine loss. Number 5. The tongue sandwich. Ox tongue, bought whole at a price cheaper than prime cuts, boiled for hours, then pressed overnight in the cold pantry beneath a weighted board. By morning, it had set into a shape that could be sliced cleanly and evenly. Thin slices, pink and silky, layered onto bread with mustard or salt. Tongue improves as it cools. The flavour concentrates. The texture settles into something rich without heaviness, meaty without being crude. Workers at factories and railway yards found this. Mothers took quiet pride in a well-prepared tongue. The boiling, the pressing, the careful slicing for the week's lunches. This was craft, not concession. As convenience meats arrived in supermarket chillers, and the direct relationship between animal and meal became something the culture preferred not to examine, the tongue sandwich faded. The weekly pantry ritual belongs to a different age, but for those who knew it, the taste was something worth knowing. Number 4. The cheese and onion sandwich. In 1954, cheese came off the ration. Working-class Britain celebrated in the most direct way available, by eating it constantly. Hard cheddar, the only cheese most families regularly bought, sliced thickly onto bread. Raw onion added with the confidence of someone who didn't need to worry about their breath, because everyone in the canteen smelled the same. The combination was bold and honest. Sharp cheese against the sweet heat of raw onion, softened by bread and whatever spread the morning had produced. Some added Branston pickle. The purists left it alone. The smell was the signature. You knew immediately who had the cheese and onion sandwich. It lingered on their fingers long after the tin was closed. In the working-class lunchbox, strong flavours were not an embarrassment. They were honesty. They were, I am cheap, I am filling, and I taste exactly like what I say I am. Number 3. The Bovril sandwich. Dark as coal. Spread thin across bread in the dark at 5:30 in the morning. The sharp, savoury tang hitting the kitchen before the kettle had finished. Bovril. Beef extract reduced to a dense paste and sealed in those brown jars, was marketed as a restorative for workers, soldiers, and anyone facing conditions that required a man to be more than he felt. The marketing wasn't entirely wrong. Spread thin, Because thin was practical and sufficient, it delivered an intensity of meaty flavour entirely disproportionate to its cost. A jar lasted weeks if you were careful. No cooking, no refrigeration, nothing between the jar and the bread but the scrape of a knife. Children either became lifelong converts or recoiled completely. Fathers ate it without question. As convenience foods multiplied, Bovril was gradually repurposed into a hot drink sold at football grounds. The sandwich use faded. But for those who spread it thin on white bread before dawn, it was fuel. It was warmth. It was the taste of getting on with it. Number 2. The tripe sandwich. Tripe, the honeycomb lining of a cow's stomach, boiled until it moved from rubbery to merely firm, sliced thin, served cold between 2 slices of bread with salt and a splash of vinegar. Tripe shops across Lancashire and Yorkshire sold it for pennies a pound. It was cheap. It provided protein. It kept without refrigeration through a long morning shift. The texture was soft in a gelatinous way that bread didn't naturally want to meet. The flavour was mild to the point of emptiness, which is why the salt and vinegar were not optional. They were structural requirements. The oral histories are plain. You did not complain. It was food, it was cheap, you ate it. That is not resignation. That is the iron pragmatism of people who had learned through generations that the question was never whether you wanted it, but whether it kept you going. It did. That was the only qualification required. Number 1. The bread and scrape. 2 slices of bread, a dish of butter or margarine or dripping that is almost empty, a knife applied carefully across the surface, gathering the last traces of fat, spreading them as thinly as they will go. The 2 slices pressed together, wrapped in brown paper, dropped into the snap tin. No filling, no flavour beyond the faint ghost of fat and the soft chew of the bread. That is the entire sandwich. In the leanest years of the 1930s and 1940s, it appeared in snap tins across Britain, carried by fathers to shipyards and mines, by children to school, by mothers to factory floors where the hours were long and the pay was short. It was not a meal in any meaningful sense. It was the form of a meal, the shape of a sandwich without the substance of one. It silenced hunger just enough to get you through the afternoon. The diaries from this period say it without sentiment. Bread and scrape again. At least it's something. That phrase is the truest thing ever written about working-class food in the first half of the 20th century. Not gratitude, not despair. The quiet discipline of people who had learned to make do with what there was and ask no further questions of it. Of all 15 sandwiches on this list, this is the most honest. It strips the sandwich to its absolute essence. Bread, fat, hunger, and the refusal to give up. That is what the snap tin was. That is what it has always been. The taste of a generation that worked, endured, wasted nothing, and never once let an empty cupboard mean an empty stomach. If someone in your family carried a snap tin, you come from people who knew how to endure. That is worth remembering. We'll see you in the next one.